O'Reilly Auto Parts puede ayudarte a revisar tu luz check engine, luz ABS o luz de mantenimiento con O'Reilly Veriscan. El servicio es gratis y recibirás un informe con soluciones verificadas por técnicos maestros certificados ASE. Si necesitas ayuda, O'Reilly Auto Parts te puede recomendar un taller. Pregunta por O'Reilly Veriscan hoy mismo.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I am a journalist. I dedicate myself to counting reality, and crime is part of it. I will look for the truth of the cases through forensic science. But I will not do it alone. My name is Dani Álvarez and Paco Etxeberria is the bone reader. Thank you to watch the video. September 2013, 1:30 in the morning. In this Pharaoh's forest track, the lifeless body of Asunta appears. She was only 12 years old when she was killed by her adoptive parents, Alfonso Basterra and Rosario, Porto. The crime of Asunta is in everyone's memory. But do we know exactly what happened? There are still some questions, and I hope Paco Etxeberria helps me clarify them. Paco, on a rural road like this was where they found the 21st of September 2013, the girl Asunta Basterra, lifeless. Yes, imagine those two men who at night make this tour of the slope. It is found in the girl's body, yes. What position was it? How did they find her? It is described in the body lifting diligence such as this is mouth of, in supine position. He has the left arm flexed with his hand on the shoulder area, but it is not impossible to think that that body was exactly face down. And who knows, if those who find the body when seeing the body in that position, what you do is verify, it is alive, it is dead, who is the person? And this movement has occurred that can also incorporate a certain confusion. The orange ropes were also there. Indeed, close. Everything around can have interest. Another thing is that then it indicates on stage it becomes an evidence of utility, which is interpreted here as yes, because perhaps the girl was tied. We have clear then, Paco, that this was the place where they found Asunta, but it was not the place where Asunta died. I think that is safe. This is a scene, in any case, secondary. The primary scene is where the facts that lead to worsen and die. In this case, there are some unanswered questions and others, whose answer is still open. Thing that usually happens. Not everything is perfectly round. In short, Dani, I believe that there are things that are not clear in Asunta's death. Basque journalist Alfonso Basterra and his wife Rosario Porto were convicted of the provincial court of Coruña as authors of the murder of his daughter Asunta with the aggravating kinship. However, in the sentence there are still shadow areas. Why did Alfonso and Rosario decide to end their daughter's life? Was the asphyxiation caused by his mother the real cause of Asunta's death as collected by the sentence? The jury, unanimously, finds the accused, Rosario Porto Ortega, guilty of the criminal act of having killed Asunta Basterra Porto, without the possibility of defending himself. The jury, unanimously, finds the defendant Alfonso Basterra Camporo, guilty of the criminal act of having killed Asunta Basterra Porto without the possibility of defending himself. I traveled to Coruña to meet with José Antonio Vázquez Zan, the investigating judge of the case. He knows firsthand the ins and outs of this disconcerting crime. Also to its protagonists. We enter the technical parts of the case. For example, in the removal of the body. What evidences were found at that time? At the time of the removal of the body, what found us was clear evidence. Precisely that opened the fan to know that any possibility was possible. Since we do not have a clear line, we are not going to sleep as long as we do not have all the data we think. Because what we were afraid was that any data that could guide us a little could disappear. Paco, there are some aspects of Asunta's autopsy that do not convince you. We are going to make some approaches around how it was. How were evidence in the crime scene? It seemed that the issue was easy. Since the body appeared, it was suspected in the parents, it seemed a simple issue from the point of view of judicial investigation. And then lengthened over time, because there were some aspects that were not understood. In this case, the temperature was not taken to the fullest. I believe that at that first moment what is being suspected is sexual aggression. What does temperature take with sexual assault have? Well, for example, if you are thinking about sexual aggression, you should not make a manipulation of the genital area to take the temperature in the rectum. The most reliable temperature taking in a body is in the rectum. Yes, normally in the scene it is taken in the rectum, then at the time of autopsy it can be taken in other parts of the organism. One of the reasons why an exploration of the body is not made in the place, which was one of the things that people criticized, here, why did you not take the temperature of the body? Why didn't they undress the girl? Because we are in a moor, that is, we are in the middle of a forest. If you make a body, you will contaminate it. Right now there are some techniques to date death, the date of death. There are some techniques to analyze what are the very advanced cadaveric remains. It is not necessary to take the temperature. Then what we did was as if it were a bag, that is, his feet were pocketed, his hands pocketed, his head pocketed, preserving that body as much as possible to reach the autopsies as he was on the track. And later, how did he do it? What results did it give? The autopsy was a very meditated and very prepared autopsy. That leads us to the decision to incinerate the body a few days later, 3 days, if I'm not mistaken. It was not a decision made with some precipitation. No, let's see. And I had already talked to the technicians and forensic technicians. We had told me, we have analyzed the body, we have extracted enough samples of the body to repeat all the autopsies that are loved, as to reiterate all the analytics that want, therefore, keep that corpse like this. It is superfluous. The question is, when the body is incinerated, all the results of the analyzers were already had. Of course, no, the results did not, but we had samples of hair, humor, fabrics. Enough samples are always preserved as for any analytics. The most hypothetical, can a second analytics be done? If there were still spaces of doubt, shadow spaces, was it an error incinerating the body as soon? It is a strange thing. I am not going to describe it as an error or not, but it surprised a lot. If there were no incinerated, new evidence could have been made that maybe they gave us different conclusions. Surely. For example, new samples so that they were analyzed again in their toxicology section, for example, or in that of criminalistics. If there is no sexual assault, which seems that there has been, however, we could try to look for DNA of what the girl's defense can be in front of an aggressor, for example. And that was done. But if it does not work, the same must be returned on the body to take other samples in other places. Because uncertainty remained for a few days. Although asphyxiation was pointed out, the truth is that there were still doubts about the total of September 2013. Asunta sees television quietly while her father, Alfonso Basterra, prepares the food. 14.45 hours. Rosario Porto arrives at her ex-husband's house. It is some eggs, an ingredient necessary for the mushroom scrambled that Alfonso is cooking. The dish adds 27 orfidals. 25, 26, 27. These are the pills that Asunta took. The number already seemed very high, but seeing them here, Paco is tremendous. Yes, due to the concentration of the orispan in blood, this fact seems to be one of the most objective of this research. From the forensic point of view, this analysis throws a result, a concentration, and that carries a calculation to this number of pills. And truly with this set of pills it would not be difficult, of course, hide them and tell them to ingest a person without noticing. Hide them why? It is difficult to give 27 pills to a person. 1-to-1 would be as impossible, but mixed, crushed, also diluted. But imagine that day at noon in that food, that by the calculation in the hours of how the facts are in that day, the reasonable thing is to think that staminate or less was administered with the food of the noon. What effects does this type of poisoning have on a girl like Asunta? Well, this is a medication that is used to sedate people, and what produces first of all is a phenomenal drowsiness, a relaxation, sleep, rest, and in the risk of poisoning can give respiratory depression, and in the worst end situation, a respiratory paralysis. Leave some type of rest, say, secondary in some vital organ that can be detected. The heart, the liver, I don't know. No, I wouldn't leave. Well, acutely, when a toxicological study is done on a corpse, you can see how toxicokinetic has been, that is, how it has been ingested and distributed. Let's say, from this product or its derivatives are in urine or are in blood or are in the liver. This can allow in some cases to understand how distribution has been. But administered orally as in food that passes to the digestive tract does not produce any greater damage in any other organ. The major and the main one could be that when you are relaxed asleep you enter to breathe more and more slowly, make a respiratory depression, and if no one sees you, nobody helps you in that position, you head yourself in the final risk of respiratory paralysis. Now that I see here the crushed pills, the feeling of danger increases because you realize that they can throw this in any product and take it without you realizing. It would be completely unnoticed, yes. One can think that when a girl of barely 13 and 27 orfidals, perhaps it is not even necessary to suffocate her. It is an overdose and will die for that overdose. We all remember the time when people committed suicide with their own antidepressants and alcohol. We remember all that, right? Okay. Why now nobody suicide with its antidepressants and alcohol? Because the pharmaceutical industry, which is the most powerful in the world, has developed antidepressants that precisely, even if you have an antidepressant overdose and mix it with alcohol, will never be mortal. What it generates is a hypnotic where the person is amending their decision-making capacity, but not even their capacity for movement. But he will be able to move, he will be able to speak, he will be able to behave like a robbery, he is a hypnotic. 26 officers do not kill you. After the food in Alfonso Basterra's house, the events precipitate. How were the last hours of Asunta? Nobody better to clear my doubts that with Lou Gilda, Galician journalist who followed the case from beginning to end and knows the most relevant details. Angel Angilda, how are you? Hi, Daniel. Delighted. We are facing the number 8 of Republic Argentina, here in the center of Santiago, which is where Alfonso Basterra lived. Yes, he rented the floor a few months before the death of Asunta's murder, in January 2013, and especially because he was very close to what was Rosario's family home and his daughter, who was just around, right? Dr. Teero. Rosario and Alfonso lived close even though they no longer lived together. Alfonso Basterra, after divorce, in January 2013, leaves Santiago, is a time outside, and then returns and tries to resume the relationship with his ex-wife and rent this floor very close to her house. We are going to rebuild with you what were the last hours of Asunta, what were his last movements that began precisely here, on this floor, because here there was a family meal. And then, after that meal, what happens? Asunta leaves this portal alone and goes to her mother's house, which is a few meters away. And we know what that tour does because it is recorded. For a security chamber. This is then the banking entity that captures with Asunta Basterra alone, a few meters after leaving their home. Yes, it is captured by a security chamber inside. Surprised that parents, after supplying that toxic dose of lorazepam, let her walk down the street because you could find someone, they could discover them, something could happen to her. It is one of the things that do not fit. For months she was receiving ersepam, she was asleep, drugged to music classes and other commitments that Alfonso and Rosario argued during the trial. They always said that the girl had allergy. It is already what she says in Basterra when there are those episodes in music classes and that by that allergy antihistamines are supplied by her allergy, right? The Asunta arrived, how are you? That you were allergy. And she told me, no, I have no allergy. They gave me some powders that knew fatal, which I had sleeping, I don't know how many hours and nobody means the truth, nobody means what happens. But who gave them to you? Mother? The girl has coordination problems, which has a dry mouth, who wants to sit down. Keep tired for research. Asunta's music teachers warned weeks before their death of strange behavior in the girl. In the trial it was shown that his parents had been giving her calmly. Were they rehearsing how to kill her? During all the previous months in which she was giving her tranquilizers to the girl, they were doing a kind of rehearsal with what they did later. That there were essays is very possible, precisely because of that repetition of behaviors. An isolated fact that it has no explanation is easy to admit it. Several consecutive facts that have no explanation is more difficult to admit. And I believe that the court weighed a lot, that they were not able to explain certain strange behaviors that occurred in July, certain strange behaviors that were put. They occurred the previous week, just to the murder. I believe that has weighed a lot in the mood of the court. How long does medicines take effect? In half an hour the effect has to be noticed. What is safe is, it is reasonable, come on, that lorazepam has been supplied in food. What happens is that in this case it has also been found that there was lorazepam that has to do with previous intakes, months before. That has been discovered in the hair. And that lorazepam does not come from the food of that same day. I am interested in knowing, Luis Manuel, what is the process you follow to analyze the hair, the remains of toxic that may be in the hair? Well, we will first need to have a hair sample. A sample of mine, for example. The hair that I am going to cut will be from your occipital area of the head. Why from there? It is the appropriate area for the hair sample since it grows in a homogeneous way over time. And what tells you your hair? What can my hair tell you about me? You will say consumption over time. If I have a centimeter of hair, I can establish the consumption of toxic in the last month. If I had 2 centimeters in the last 2 months and so on. So, all that information is processed there. Yes, in fact, when body hair has been analyzed, it has been known what toxic substances it has been consumed in life. But if I had dyed hair, would that be in the way of research? That can hinder the analysis, just as it happens in gray hair or blonde, where the amount of drug or toxic deposited is lower. Well, worry about not taking more than 1 centimeter. Do not make me a breakdown. That of hairdressing I do not know if you know much. You have very short hair, 1.5 centimeters, with which I can know what you have consumed in the last month and a half approximately. Well, Luis Manuel, you have that hair sample. What are you supposed to do with him now? To prepare your analysis you have to wash your hair. The hair to decontaminate it with possible environmental toxic. We enclose the hair in this tube that has steel balls. We put it in the ball grinder. And the final result is a very fine dust. That dust is already likely to be treated just as we treat a sample of blood or urine. He has not asked the prosecutor, but I am going to ask. Did you kill your son? Of course not. Did you perform any act that could keep so that your daughter dies, that is, that she could contribute to her daughter to die? Did you want to have any interest in your daughter's death? Thank you. One of the points that generates the most uncertainty in this case is the profile of Alfonso Basterra. Best decades Alfonso was a young Bilbao journalist who arrived in Santiago to work in the writing of the Galician Mail. José Antonio Pérez was his partner during those years. He witnessed his social ascent following the marriage to Rosario Porto and had contact with him again after the murder of Asunta. Here Alfonso Basterra worked for some time, right? Yes, 2 years in peak, almost 3 years. When did you meet him? Well, when he arrived, he came to do practices in the summer. We did not agree in the same section, but well, we were writing that relatively small and we were here together every day. How was Alfonso Basterra at that time? He was a young kid. He was very Basque in the sense that he liked to go out for a wine, to take some tapas and always pointed to all the spree that were from the little girl and of all that always. Basterra changes when he meets Rosario Porto, when he starts dating her. Yes, change. At first, well here in the writing, for example, it changed again. It went from being a partner who went out with his friends to go out alone because there was an hour in which he said he had to leave with Rosario and that he left. He became very dependent on her. Before the facts are triggered, it seems that there is an obvious change and that also generates a fame later in the media construction of this entire case, which is that Alfonso was a person subject to Rosario Porto. Do you think this was so? I don't think a person submitted. How would you define Rosario Porto? Well, the typical girl well in a city of provinces. Very dependent on her family, haughty, right? Proud. Rosario was born to be a winner. It belonged to the upper compostelana class, daughter of a prestigious lawyer and a history of history. Rosario exercised as a lawyer and became consul of France in Santiago. In his city everyone knew her. But beyond his professional achievements, perhaps the best portrait of Rosario was made by his own daughter in a disturbing poem. My mother is greedy, but not precious. It is short, but not sympathetic. Sing fatal. Cooking with salt. Eat worse. Drink better. It has little flexibility, but a lot of age. He doesn't know how to speak, but scold. He knows how to scream, but not ravage. We are facing a case, José Antonio, with many penumbra areas that we are not even able to see. No, I believe that first the personal relationship between the two, right? It deteriorates a lot. Rosario's parents die in 9 months, both die, right? They stay in front, right? They have to manage a fairly juicy heritage and have to make a life they did not do. I think there were problems, right? And all that makes a dent in his relationship and leads to a divorce. She, in one of the activities in which she was involved, because she meets a third people in that third person and discover things that she did not have until that moment, and there is a very important change also in it until the moment when Alfonso finds out and rides in anger. Is the behavior of Alfonso then changes? Yes, the behavior at that time was changed. He went from being very quiet, that my vital needs have them covered, to become violent. Here is Asunta. Yes, it comes after eating to do homework. And where is Rosario? Well, Rosario stays at Basterra's house, it seems that to smoke, because he did not smoke in front of the girl, and then he will look for his car to the garage that is there. And there you see the jewelry security cameras go out with the car. At some point in this area, Rosario picks up Asunta and both go to the Teo Chalet. The one that we lack in all this, is Basterra. Where was Basterra? Well, he said that he was on his floor all afternoon, that he did not leave there, that he was cooking meatballs and reading a book. The problem is that the mobile had it disconnected and then it cannot be placed through the phone, but there is a testimony of a French studies in Asa has seen that he saw them in a traffic light of a little more up, to the father and the girl, and that would give rise to think that he also climbed into the car of Rosario Porto. Although it is not recorded in any security chamber. That was what the jury left to say, that Alfonso Basterra was in Teo at the time of murder. After the appeal to the Superior of Justice of Galicia, this court changes its qualification on the facts. In the specific case of Alfonso Basterra. Yes. Maybe because there is no evidence that he was in the house when Asunta died. The court of the jury is analyzed. Here, I do not know where this man is, he has not been able to accredit him, instead I have an aide that is a witness who sees it on the street. I don't know where this man is, and I have an indication that this body, a single person, cannot move it. I do not know where this man is, and yet I have no camera, after the witness who sees him to go home. Then I understand that he has climbed too. Okay. What the court says is, here, those same data can be interpreted in favor of filling. We don't know where that man is. Then, if we don't know, we will always put it in the most favorable. And even though he was on the street at 6:30 that the witness sees him, then he became home even if no camera takes him. That does not pay it for what we have said before, that is, it is still participating in an entire framework because there is only a final act. Which is, the acaution or the arphesia. But there is all preparatory acts that are the provision of our vital, the preparation of the murder, all that framework that cannot be done without two people. We understand that it remains responsible, therefore, it is equally guilty has participated or not. They consider him just as a participant, but declare that he has not been accredited until the last consequences, or at least with the absolute certainty that he would have been whole. That is what the Superior Court of Justice of Galicia does. Any minute, however little, to be with my daughter, for me life. The arrival of Asunta was an event in Santiago. She was the first Chinese girl adopted in the city. Alfonso and Rosario looked like the perfect marriage. However, the day Asunta died had been separate for 8 months. How did this separation affect Asunta? Jose Antonio Perez recalls the close relationship that Alfonso had with his daughter. Apparently it was a model father. Since Asunta to Santiago, Alfonso was followed with Asunta. You saw her take to class, go looking for her. Take her to the activities. You saw Alfonso a lot, very much with Asunta. As Rosario, that lover who had business in Morocco, she spoke French. No? They traveled together to Morocco. Rosario needs someone to stay with the girl. And he stays Alfonso. Alfonso goes from being a father to be, thus chosen, in quotes, who takes care of the girl. He does in exchange for not lacking money, that he continues to enjoy his status. Because you, in some way, and another many people, this is a small city, you continued seeing the girl and Alfonso Basterra himself, in fact. Yes. You said before, he took care of his care. But of course, I saw Alfonso Basterra every day with the girl. He knew that Alfonso Basterra took the girl to the pool. He knew that Alfonso Basterra went with the girl to music classes. That is, I knew that Alfonso devised, or at least apparently for the girl. Of the time I saw Asunta with their parents, because 80% bike on him the father, 10% with both and another 10% only with Rosario. And of course, in that you say. It was Basterra, it could be Basterra. It would cost me to think a priori. Anzo, Teo is a town that is here cerquita, a small town, right? Yes, it is a bordering municipality composed of several disseminated villages, and they're the family villa, the family of Rosario Porto. There are several security cameras that record the journey between Santiago and Teo del Mercedes de Rosario. Yes, there is specifically that of La Galuresa, that of the service station, which records the Mercedes de Rosario Porto leaving at 6:30 in the afternoon in the direction of Teo, and in it, in the seat of the co-pilot, there is a small person, which is Asunta. This was done by the land that Rosario Porto gave in the police station that he left his daughter doing homework and places them, puts both in the place of crime. We arrive at the Porta family's house, in the municipality of Teo. Proable that it is a huge farm, about 10,000 square meters, located in an isolated and silent area. It seems the perfect place to commit a crime without uncomfortable witnesses. Well, Enzo, because this is Teo's house, where it seems that he died assassinated, Basterra. We know that she and Rosario Porto arrived together in the car. Did a neighbor see them? When they arrive, no. What is known about the arrival time is that Rosario disconnects the alarm. And then when it comes out, only Rosario, there is a neighbor next to her. What neighbor? What he said? That he saw her, she was in a hurry, that she said she had to go to meet, with Asunta. She was already getting dark, right? The girl doesn't see her. In theory, the girl would go in the trunk, right? Already the body. After that neighbor sees her, already Rosario, in Santiago he denounces before the police the disappearance of her daughter. And they return to this house, both she and Alfonso Basterra, already accompanied by the civil guard. What attitude do they maintain with the agents? When they arrive here, in Rosario the agents, the civil guard, go to the service. And the people follow her and discover her by manipulating a paper trying to eliminate evidence, and among which are ropes that are the same as those who are next to the body on the forest track, right? And everything indicates that yes, that these strings were used in the transport of the body. Another dark point of the investigation. The ropes found next to Asunta's body. It was a key evidence that served to inculpate Rosario and Alfonso, but Asunta's DNA was not found in them. Did the ropes roam to tie the girl as the sentence collects? Paco has her own theory. The aspect that catches my attention powerfully is that it was said that it was tied. For dolls, being so that there is no injury on the wrists. If they had tied it, I would have to have marks in the hands of the dolls. I would say yes. If they had tied it and had been alive, someone will say, but of course, it turns out that it was already very bad, sedated as a consequence of the drugs, but that has no rubbing, and that in those ropes that are in direct contact with the skin and no DNA traces have appeared, it allows me to think that it does not matter if it was tied or not tied, therefore it is not, and that the set of small lesions distributed in the previous plane, the plane posterior of the body, are justified by the manipulation of the body in that final situation, that is, they are the injuries that could be described from the perimortem, which are around death, but that do not necessarily explain the final cause of this death. In the place where the body appears ascending, some ropes were also very famous because there has been a lot of talk of them, despite the fact that the girl's DNA was not in those ropes. The autopsy demonstrates that the strings were on top of the girl's clothes. The girl wore a tracksman. Why do they tie it if they are asleep? Well, there are two reasons. The first is, at the time you are offering a girl, seizures will be produced. If you don't have it tied, it's very complicated. And second, a controversy does not have it tied is very difficult to move. Did you have marks of having had the strings? In the autopsy that took to trial, precisely what other brands they carried were exhibited. It is curious, brands are not usually superficial, they are usually more intramuscular. Thank you to watch the video. What can you say, Paco, of the strings that appeared next to Asunta's body and that according to the sentence served to tie the girl? Look, this rope is equivalent to what I have here, of this color. And so plastic type. And what is said is that they served to tie the girl, and thus some of the injuries that the ankles like the dolls would be justified. But it is true that where the body was, a few distance, a fragment appeared. And as there was an equivalent ball in the house, a relationship was established then that members of that house were on that stage leaving the girl and leaving the rope lying. It is important, although I could discuss it. Can you let me stain? We can do the test that has to do with genetics. Let's see. If we are going to tie you like this, that side you are already tied. And now I attach this other hand in this way. You can imagine that if you move now a little will produce some marks, and precisely there you are already leaving your cells on the rope. And however, that fragment of rope had no traces of DNA. What is the reason they were there? It is the result of a chance. Then, there has to be your DNA, which could be verified in the laboratory. But I can think in particular that some of the brands he has on the wrist or on the forearm, the girl, are as a consequence of an important and thick clock that the girl carries, that they are a little on the forearm, considering that I think that the body was supported on the ground in the support of the body on the same arm in the hours when it remained in that slope. That is, that I could have those brands for another reason, for a bracelet, for the clock. The girl has even quints in the body surface that are not all justified by this rope. Then there has been some drag effect, just removed from the car. I think that perhaps some of the injuries, and why not almost all, have to do with that movement that was made with the body. So why was so much importance to the strings? Because thus it is reflected in the first interpretation, since the strings are there and in the house there is a ball. From an equivalent rope, it is logical, police to try to establish the relationship, but I do not think it is proven at all that this rope served to tie the girl. It means that they did not use them. It depends on whether it has been tied directly on the skin and has made a great strength to let go, or has not happened, so the amount of tissue, of skin that can be adhered to the rope is much lower. Practically all the surfaces that touch us we would leave remains that could contain DNA. Indeed, we leave remains. What happens is that we do not always leave enough remains. A minimum amount is needed so that the profile can then be obtained. What is the process then to try to extract DNA from a rope? For example, we can try to extract the DNA from this rope. That may sound to you. Yes, I think I know where you are going. This is the rope with which Paco tied you. If in this rope there are DNA of Paco and mine, Paco's, I understand that he would be at the ends because they were the ones who played to tie me. It is precisely at the extremes where he would make maximum strength when knitting the rope. Therefore, those points must be treated independently of the center of the rope that is where you could be, your DNA. It is curious to see your own DNA on a screen. That graphic defines a person, distinguishing it from other human beings. It makes it unique. Yes, that is me. Another unknown in which the sentence does not even stop. Who moved Asunta's body from Teo's house to the slope where it was found? Another aspect that is not clear is that we do not know who transported Asunta's body to the place where he appeared later. Throughout the investigation, data related to the transfer of the body came out, but since they were not accused of desecration, they were left out. That is, what you cannot do is a castle of cards trying to accuse of 20 things that are not justified. How do you think they brought the body here? They would come with a vehicle. That vehicle would be parked on the rural and simple road. How to open the door of the Porta Malida, I do not know. Take out the body, and this is something that a single person can do. In addition, it is a 13 girl, it has no way to prevent you from picking up on the trunk and simply dragging the Al-Talus area. The small injuries or brands that it presents can simply be the drag of the body. Then, I think that you cannot rule out the possibility that both to climb to the vehicle, already dead, of course, and to go down, and specifically to transfer him, I suppose that held from the body, the feet are practically being touched on the ground. And then the effect of the scrapes occurs, which are specifically described in the autopsy, in the ankles area, but more specifically on the outer faces. I am fully convinced that Rosario transported him because the girl had in the heels typical footprints of falling from the car, dragging the leather. The girl was in the back seat. She took it below her arms because the girl appeared with the climb and dragged her. Although there are some strange moments, right? That moment to leave her in a place where she could see her. I believe that it is the only maternal feature that it had in this whole process. What is the natural reaction after the death of a son? Confirms that one of the first things Alfonso Basterra did was call the writing of the Galician mail. Jose Antonio Perez will not forget that call. You talked to Alfonso Basterra himself when Asunta disappeared. I was on duty that Sunday. I had on duty and I found out at home first in the morning. They called me. They told me, hey, that a girl appeared dead, and I sent a WhatsApp to see who was on duty in court. Judge Tan was. And after a while they confirmed that Alfonso's daughter had died. I called the web to hang the news. And I arrived here at 15 minutes, they would be 4:15, 11:20 calls the girl from the entrance and tells me, hey, what is it? Alfonso Basterra wants to talk to you. I said, but sure, but Alfonso Basterra, how? And nothing, he put on and said, hey, Alfonso, you need something, how is your wife? The typical thing that is said at some point. I said, no, look, I was seeing the websites and only the Mail publishes the news. I said, oh, yes, he says. And I said, Alfonso, but what are you doing the websites? Instead of being with your wife and being, no, I called you because I wanted to do not publish anything. What does this behavior tell you? At a time of that loop we were talking about, I told Alfonso, but what are you doing there looking at the website and you will not see if he pills the uncle who killed her? Alfonso Basterra took a statement twice. He was entitled to 2 statements. What happens is that the second resigned. He resigned. That is a usual behavior. Yes. In this specific case, they had a strategy from the beginning. I think it is clear, that is, throughout the instruction, it is a strategy to let others demonstrate and we are defensive. That is, he did not have a collaborative attitude. Alfonso Basterra has a murderous or accomplice profile. The truth is that you have not allowed me to reveal that relationship. But I think it has a very defined profile. I think it has a very clear profile in that the day you want to know. He himself refused the expert evidence and I believe that for some reason, but I repeat, professionally I cannot reveal that data. They have passed more than 3 years of the murder of Asunta and the reasons for the crime have not been clear. What took Rosario and Alfonso to kill his own daughter? The hypotheses remain open. At this point there is one thing that I am still unable to understand. What was the mobile? Why did they want to kill her? It is not a unique mobile. It is very soon to know. When there is a joint murder, it is normal for each of the participants to have a different motivation. The media at that time of so much pressure and during the trial, they presented us to a Rosario Porto, who was the organizer of everything, and an Alfonso Basterra, say, that it was his gregarious. Let's see, the media act depending on the information you have. Make a rating of Rosario organizer, manipulator, manipulated baster. I think it is a mistake, a serious mistake. And I believe that over time it will be known a bit what is the role it plays. It does not mean that it is the other way around, but simply that it is different. It is very different from what you are raising. Which would you say then what could be the mobile of the murder of assault? I could not be unpleasant. I think that, they only know that, and I even have doubts that the typical mobile of a murder that we are accustomed to seeing than a passionate mobile, an economic mobile, the mobile of a robbery, which exists in this case. I believe that it was a concatenation of circumstances, it was a snowball that was growing, and that caused the fatal outcome. But at this point, do you think that the two acted in a concerted way, that the two had the same interest, that the two bothered the girl, or that there was one who carried the singing voice in this whole process? I believe that they're the two I distributed, in that case as the jury, at 50%. So Alfonso and Rosario know why they murdered their daughter. Martin almost portrays parents who do not deserve that name. Martin, what catches the attention of the case? Well, it catches my attention that it is not a crime, it is not a crime that we are used to the famous crimes of the pages of the case, to the crimes of Puerto Araco, to the Crimen Mazoral de Posta and Reyes. Here there is no railway, this is a ruiatory crime, as if he had purgated him, Estes Larson, a Crimean dentro of a society, of a small city, with liberal professionals, with many sexual biases, economic, much secretism, with couples that are not what they seem. You have captured in the drawing the image that we all have in the head of the trial, in which both fighters appeared, computed, there they have a low look. Yes, because they have lost everything, I believe. No, they have not only lost the daughter, in a voluntary way, they have lost freedom, since they are going to, they will in China, hamper diddler essence, probably morality, but they have also lost social prestige. That is very hard too. In a situation of those, of decline, of sinking, the color that is what stands out, which enhances. It is a faded color, it is, life has already ended for them. His life no longer has color. The fact that both are with their eyes down, with almost closed eyes, does they mean they are transmitting penalty for the death of their daughter? No, I believe that what they do not want is to see him in front of him, they do not want to see their contemporaries, their fellow citizens, do not want to see that others will see in them. The cause of the death of the girl A was established as death for suffocation. Many questions arose around this crime and is still a last point of controversy. How did Asunta really die? During the trial, the forensic of the case, José Blanco Pompín, presented his hypothesis about the death of the girl. Will our coroner agree, Paco Etxeberria? We have some drawings, Paco, which shows us the spots that Asunta presented during the removal of the body in the autopsy. Yes, what we see in this example would be the spots on the clothes, fingers and face, the face, taking into account that there are neither socks or shoes on the feet. The stains of the face they indicate. Well, that is described as an organic fluid and has enough to do with what later in the autopsy will be described as a lung edema. That is, the lungs are flooded, it has an excess of water and the water comes out by air that usually appears on the mouth and that permeates not only the area of the face, but part of the shoulder and part of what the chest is on the left side in the same clothes. So in a first glance you can think about suffocation. Of course, that more what is within the body guides death towards asphyxiation. Then we will have to see what this suffocation has produced. Paco will explain his theory about how Asunta died. To do this, it takes me to the virtual hospital of the Faculty of Medicine of the University of the Basque Country. We are in a simulation room. Yes, or virtual hospital. This doll reproduces in the midst of as much as possible what a human being would be with its vital constants, etc. A patient with his constants. Here we have heart rate, rhythm, oxygen saturation, how many times he breathes, how many pulsations he has, what tension he has. We wanted to enter the case of Asunta. The sentence said that Asunta had died asphyxiated after being poisoned with lorazepam. Can we know what effects it has? A similar simulation could be reached, yes. Primero, Dr. Felix Zubias reproduces a lorazepam poisoning on the doll. Next, Paco will cause asphyxiation by compression of mouth and nose. We see that heart rate is slower than normal, then saturation or blood oxygen level is enough to live, but it is at the low limit, as it breathes less times than normal and as the tension because it is tending down, it is low. We can think that this is how it was. That is, on this basal situation. And without being able to react, the orcept would prevent him from fighting a situation of suffocation, the asphyxiation would come. We see how that is monitored. Perfect. We put something in the face to make it more the same, more real. Okay. Well, we put it like this and we will modify it. Here we observe how there is a fight phase, as oxygenation is falling little to little, as the heart accelerates, as the respiratory rate also begins to accelerate. And the body tries to fight against that lack of oxygen. The frequency is increasing, isn't it? Now cardiac. We are accelerating, and the resistance capacity will be over and we will see how the heart will stop. And if we do nothing, because in 2-3 minutes lead to a brain death. Even practically, and if we retired, it could. It is practically lost. That is. This is the sequence that accounts for the sentence. Do you think this happened, Paco? In view of the concentration of orazepam in the blood, I think it is not impossible to think that there was a critical final situation and resulting in death only with orazepam. That in this case it is also known that months before it had been approved or administered. We do not know what intention. The key is mostly in the horaspam. Do you think suffocation was fully accredited in the conviction? Let's see. In the conviction, what the jury said is that, at least in my conscience and as an instructor, I believe that all the elements to prove that showed so that the jury could decide that. No, there was no doubt. For the jury there was no doubt. And for you? In my opinion, I think anyone does not care. As a lawyer, my work is another, which is to gather all its elements and put us so that those who have to decide are the ones who decide. We do care. No, my opinion does not matter to anyone. Not even the investigating judge of the case is able to say clearly how Asunta died. The only certainty is that the girl is dead. There are people who ask that young Fang is remembered, without the surnames Basterra Porto of those who were his murderers. The place where his body appeared is now a sanctuary. Hele phrases as "you did not have compassion" or "we want justice." They tell me that a woman takes care of bringing fresh flowers, of keeping her memory alive. Among the residents of the area, this place is already known as the Camino de Asunta. According to the sentence, Alfonso Basterra and Rosario Porto take the house of Teo to Asunta. Between 18.33 and 20 hours, they suffocate them by compression of a soft object on his mouth and nose. At a time close to death, they tied it by the arms and ankles with some orange plastic strings. Subsequently, the Superior Court of Justice of Galicia indicates that there is no evidence that places Alfonso Basterra at the time of murder. This change does not suppose for him a condemnation reduction. Alfonso Basterra, author of the murder of Asunta Inequality planned with Rosario Porto, is still considered. I have the feeling intuition that this story is not closed, that something will happen. When they no longer have a legal opportunity to fight, they may relax, assume their circumstances, and some of them try to behave as it is. There is still much to see. In the case of Asunta we have the culprits in jail, but there are still some unanswered questions. For example, where was Alfonso Basterra when the girl died? Or who brought the body here? And especially the most important question is what leads parents to kill their daughter? Yes, I believe that the mobile is the most incomprehensible part of this whole matter. Once there is a sentence, the question ceases to be important. Well, the sentence must be accepted because it is a formally obtained truth, although this truth does not always conform to absolute reality and spaces of uncertainty remain. The most important thing, finally, is to try to reduce this uncertainty to zero, if possible in all cases. Sign up to the channel.